they want.
Noah, the American people are going to be listening here to find out anything they can. There's Chairman Goodlatte, obviously there, by the way, as we heard. Not a lot about what Peter Strzok said in that meeting yesterday. Still waiting to hear that. It was a closed door interview type session there. This obviously a public hearing. Your expectations?
I'd be curious to see the extent to which we see political positioning as opposed to, and by that I mean an effort to characterize the Mueller probe, which is everybody's fear is that this is an effort not to get to the bottom of what happened in the FBI in 2016, but to mischaracterize the Mueller probe as fruit of the poison tree. That would serve the president's interests, I think, politically, but I don't think it would serve the American people's. They want to know what happened in the FBI with regards to Hillary Clinton's investigations, with regards to the Russia probe in 2016, and the extent to which we draw broader conclusions about that, I don't think are supported. I don't think, for example, Charles Grassley would support those. He doesn't see any evidence for a conspiracy, but we don't know all the facts yet, so that's what we want to know.
Jessica, ahead of this, the House Judiciary Committee sent out a statement saying that Wray and Rosenstein will testify about the Inspector General's recent report concerning the handling of the probe of Hillary Clinton's private email server. What are your expectations?
I'm hopeful that it won't be too defensive, so that the congressmen and women up there won't be too aggressive, and Christopher Wray and Rod Rosenstein will feel comfortable answering in, I wouldn't say a collegial manner, but not being too defensive about what came out in the IG report. We know that there were bits and pieces for each side there. If you were a partisan, you got something out of the IG report, but it certainly has put the FBI and DOJ on notice, as it were, saying that there were mistakes that were made and that some of these firings were certainly what was supposed to happen. So I think the tone will be really interesting to see how defensive it is, rather than, as Noah was saying and Tom pointed out, that we really want to get to the bottom of what was going on in the 2016 election instead of more political posturing.
As you could see, Christopher Wray, the FBI director, has now entered the room as well. Tom, probably just a few moments away here from the beginning. Your thoughts on the line of questioning from Congress?
I think we're going to see two lines of questioning. I think one line of questioning is going to be basically, when are we getting the documents? We have asked for them. Are you going to cooperate, or are you going to continue to stonewall? I think that's one line of questioning. I think the other line of questioning, as Jessica alluded to, is there are open questions from the Inspector General's report. I think that there was a lot in it for both sides. I think the Inspector General raised several tantalizing questions that will provide fertile grounds for follow-up by members of Congress. And so I expect that we will see some follow-up questions saying the IG noted this, this, and this. What are you doing? Are you going to look into those? Are you going to answer those remaining open questions?
And the specific timing will be at odds here, because there's an issue, revolving around the Carter Page FISA application. Did that start before the investigation began? What's the timing there? And we've heard that there hasn't been a clear answer from them thus far as to when that actually kicked off. And partisans would say, oh, it started with George Papadopoulos on the Democrat side. Republicans would say this is all about what happened with Carter Page. So hopefully we'll get a definitive answer here.
Ahead of this hearing, Mark Meadows, a leading conservative from North Carolina, said it's really all about getting to the heart of any matter and transparency. Rod Rosenstein just shaking Trey Gowdy's hand there ahead of what could be a pretty fierce, pretty heated hearing on Capitol Hill. And of course, this is the second trip to Congress for Christopher Wray this month. What will be different about what we are about to see, Noah, in this hearing room versus the last time we heard from Wray?
What I find most remarkable here is the extent to which we're seeing this fight between a Republican-led Congress and a Republican administration in the White House. This is Donald Trump's DOJ, and many members are flirting with the prospect of holding the Deputy Attorney General, in contempt, or possibly even impeaching somebody of that stature. And this isn't like impeaching Eric Holder with an adversarial relationship between the House and a Democratic administration. This is the president's DOJ. He can say these documents have to be provided, and the extent to which you have not provided them is a violation of our understanding with our colleagues in the House. Why that has not happened is open to a lot of interpretation.
And there's Chairman Goodlatte there. Tom, if I could bring you in here in regards to yesterday and what we saw come out of that. Rod Rosenstein and Christopher Wray there exchanging some words ahead of this. The House Judiciary and the Oversight Committee together questioned Peter Strzok, the FBI agent, for more than 11 hours behind closed doors.
Retreat.
It was a big day, and that's all leading into this.
Yeah, I suspect at some point they will get Strzok up there to testify publicly. I mean, it seems unimaginable to me that he could go through this process without being held to account in a public forum. We saw the president gave him bad reviews. I suspect that there are many people on the Hill who still want to get answers that only he can provide. So I don't think we've heard the last from Peter Strzok.
And as far as this resolution demanding the Justice Department, Jessica, comply with document requests and subpoenas from the House Intel and Judiciary Committees, this is the House is going to be voting on that resolution. They have been stonewalling, turning over those documents, multiple requests for them.
Yeah, so they're now putting a July 6th deadline on this, but this would be a non-binding resolution if it passes anyway. Judge Napolitano has been pointing out that there are a number of documents that they want access to that they can't legally have because they would be under seal because they were used in the grand jury investigation. So putting those aside, we need to see how many documents are going to be turned over that aren't completely redacted, where you can only see one word per page. That has been the norm. Obviously, national security concerns are paramount, and we want to make sure that we're not revealing any secrets that we shouldn't be. But I think it probably is in the best interest of the FBI and the DOJ to turn over as much as possible to maybe get President Trump off his Twitter account for 20 minutes.
And, you know, you look back at what happened yesterday in that closed-door 11-hour interviewing with the two committees and Peter Strzok, that anti-Trump FBI agent, he got out of answering a lot of the questions he was asked there behind closed doors. To Tom's point, Noah, we could still see him publicly testify, which could eventually be a game change in all of this.
Yeah, so we learned from that OIG report that at least one text, a very suspect text, was withheld from House investigators. I don't think we know the extent to which how that happened, why that happened, and what were the motives behind that. That's a very serious potential breach of the public trust, and that should be litigated thoroughly. And I'm curious to see the extent to which the House Republicans in particular stick to that line of questioning. And again, try not to sprawl, because that's a very sensitive, very concerning issue. And if we begin to make political statements about the Mueller probe again, I think that we'd be getting off track.
Yeah, you are looking live on Capitol Hill. We are expecting the beginning of this hearing, the House Judiciary Committee holding a hearing with Christopher Wray and Rod Rosenstein, and it could get fiery in that heating room. We'll see. But the American people deserve answers here, Tom. There's still a lot of questions about what happened leading up to that 2016 election. And these two that we're looking at in that hearing room right now have a big job to do in restoring the confidence in the FBI and the DOJ in the minds of the American people.
Yeah, you said it. And look, I respect the fact that DOJ does have legitimate interests in secrecy and protecting methods and sources. I served at DOJ, and those are legitimate interests. At the same time, Congress has legitimate interests in oversight, and normally in kind of regular occurrence in Washington, D.C., this is classically the sort of dispute that would get resolved. There would be a compromise. Reasonable people would come together and work it all out. And it pains me to see a Republican Deputy Attorney General sparring with Republicans on the Hill. This shouldn't be happening. You know, as Rodney King said, I hope we can all get along, you know, and I hope that someone will step in, they will resolve this, and we can get back to business as usual.
The president weighed in earlier, tweeting about all this. He said Peter Strzok worked as the leader of the rigged witch hunt for a long period of time. He got it started and was only fired because the gig was up. But remember, he took his orders from Comey and McCabe, and they took their orders from you-know-who. Mueller/Comey, best friends. The president continues to weigh in a couple tweets on that this morning, Jessica.
Yeah, I would think that he would, focus more on that empty Supreme Court seat that he has instead of going down this rabbit hole again and let this just play out. This is something, though support for the Mueller probe has gone down over time, it still is something that the American people are in favor of. There still haven't been high-ranking Republicans or Democrats, certainly, who have said that Mueller is not doing his job well. And as has been pointed out by both of my co-panelists here, this is a Republican DOJ. These are Trump appointees. These are people that he wanted in those jobs. I don't think those tweets help anybody, and they certainly, they create an air of partisanship that maybe doesn't have to be here for a day.
He says he's looking for transparency in all this. No, I see you jumping in.
Yeah, because one of the things that sort of been lost in the partisan fray here is the extent to which we learned a long time ago that Peter Strzok was instrumental in helping draft James Comey's July statement, essentially indicting Hillary Clinton in every way but literally. And he replaced the key phrase with gross negligence, I believe it was. It was something just shy of legality. And We understand from the OIG report that probe, while not violating any particular regulations, guidelines of the DOJ, was botched, was not thoroughly executed. And I would be curious to see Republicans hopefully tug on that thread, because that is a very serious breach of the public trust, and while not politically valuable because it's retrospective, something that I think needs to be litigated.
We are awaiting this hearing to get underway on Capitol Hill. Rod Rosenstein, Christopher Wray set to testify before the House Judiciary Committee. We'll be right back.
Ignore the regular order of the 7-day notice of the notice.
Are you a veteran, own a home, and need cash?
Answer will follow. Christopher Wray, head of the FBI, Rod Rosenstein, Deputy AG there in the room, and we will get underway in a matter of moments here. At the heart of this hearing, remember, is the decisions the Department of Justice and FBI made regarding the Hillary Clinton email investigation, and then dovetailing off of that is the Russia matter that surrounds the Trump campaign of 2016. So we're going to jump in now. This is going to go on for hours to our audience, so you know, but this could be very interesting based on some of the statements we've heard already. John Ratcliffe on the committee, he talked about the 11-hour interview yesterday with Peter Strzok. Ratcliffe says he did not help himself, meaning Strzok, and he did not help Bob Mueller. So we'll see where we go. The chairman of the committee, Bob Goodlatte, the Republican from Virginia, now with his opening commentary as we go in live on the Hill.
These tools are not manipulated by unscrupulous actors. The recent Inspector General's report revealed bias in the top echelons of the FBI during a hotly contested presidential election. It revealed that FBI agents, lawyers, and analysts held profound biases against then-candidate Donald Trump and in favor of his opponent, Hillary Clinton. While those on the other side of the aisle continue to exclaim that these biases are only personal political predilections that had no effect on the operation of one of the biggest investigations in our nation's history, I wonder whether these same members would say the same if text messages had turned up to the tune of "Hillary is a disaster," or "We'll stop her," or cursing her with all manner of expletives, or smugly stating that particular parts of the country smell of Hillary supporters. These types of comments were originating from people who were the fact finders in the investigation. These profoundly inappropriate comments were coming from the individuals who were making decisions on whether to provide immunity to people who had already lied to investigators, and whether subjects of an investigation could sit in on interviews with other subjects of the same investigation. These were individuals who were plainly in positions of great power, with the opportunity to place greater, lesser, or even no emphasis on certain facts or interpretations of law. These actions led to complete legal exoneration of everyone involved in sending top-secret emails over personal servers and unsecured emails, and setting up a server for the explicit purpose of doing this. These actions even led to exposing at least one classified email to a foreign party that risked serious damage to our national security. Amazingly, considering their overwhelming biases, these people were also the very same people who were assigned to investigate the man that they hated, then candidate Donald Trump. My reference to the Church Committee is apropos because it not only reviewed abuses by individuals, including the FBI director himself, but focused in on surveillance abuses. Here we now face the same allegations, yet in manner that goes to the heart of our democracy. It is right out of a novel, with salacious, unverified dossiers, reports of informants that appear more like spies for the U.S. government, and application of the aforementioned surveillance powers to collect on a U.S. person once associated with President Trump's political campaign. But it's not a novel, it's real life, and we are here today to understand a little bit more about why we now must review how our intelligence and law enforcement agencies engaged in activity that appears not only wrong, but potentially illegal. All of which brings me to this body's constitutional oversight, mandate, and responsibilities. Our responsibility to the American people is to conduct robust oversight of agencies within this committee's jurisdiction, to ensure that taxpayer-funded agencies operate lawfully. Our oversight, though, is only as good as the information we are provided. This committee's oversight has been hampered by both the FBI and DOJ's lack of consistent and vigorous production of the documents we need to hold the agencies accountable. While this production has significantly improved recently, it has felt like pulling teeth much of the time to obtain and review relevant documents. Moreover, we just recently learned that some documents the Inspector General received to conduct his investigation of the 2016 election have been interpreted by the Department of Justice to fall outside the first subpoena I ever issued as chairman of this committee. Shockingly, emails and communications of DOJ officials have not been produced at all. Therefore, we have not received any emails between prosecutors working the Clinton case. Said differently, we are not receiving and have not received potentially enlightening communications between prosecutors themselves, between prosecutors and DOJ management, including former Attorney General Lynch, or even communications between DOJ officials and those with the Obama White House. This is unacceptable, particularly when we had, long before issuing the subpoena, requested all documents provided to the Inspector General other than certain ones pertaining to grand jury material. The Department of Justice and the FBI are not mentioned in the United States Constitution. The President and Congress are. Our constitutional oversight necessitates that institutions like the FBI and DOJ yield to Congress' constitutional mandate. This is non-negotiable because we must assure the American people that the agencies under our jurisdiction operate fairly, treating all equally under the law. This hearing emphasizes the importance of transparency in helping to regain both the perception and reality of impartiality of our law enforcement system. Damage to the FBI and DOJ's reputations is not something any of us desire. But now that both agencies have been on the front pages for so long, we must all work to ensure those stories are able to focus once again on the great men and women performing admirable and often heroic jobs to protect our country. We expect to hear today how the FBI and the DOJ will hold people accountable and prevent this from happening again. Thank you, and I look forward to hearing from both Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein and Director Wray. I now recognize the ranking member of the committee, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The events that have led up to this hearing are totally unacceptable. On Monday of this week, you notified us of this hearing without the 7-day notice required by the rules. On Tuesday, you started our committee markup more than an hour late again without notice to the minority. Then you allowed Mr. Jordan to offer an amendment to a resolution of inquiry that was patently non-germane, and then you stood out of view of the cameras in the hallway just off the hearing room while the majority voted to overturn the ruling of their own chair that the amendment was not germane. On Wednesday, you dropped all committee business to interview Peter Strzok, who had already volunteered to come in for an interview before you threatened him with a subpoena. Today we meet so that the majority can criticize the Deputy Attorney General to his face, largely about his failure to produce documents that you know he cannot produce. We will take a break so that we can go to the floor and vote on a so-called resolution of insistence based on the Jordan Amendment from earlier this week, a measure that is without precedent, without the force of law, and clearly a pretext for a move against Mr. Rosenstein that the majority has already planned. And what is the great emergency that justifies this last-minute hearing? Why has the majority abandoned the rules and traditions that govern civility in the House? The tired story of Hillary Clinton's emails, of course, plus a few conspiracy theories about this special counsel. When President Trump and his administration were actively separating families at the border, ripping children out of the arms of their parents and causing untold suffering to thousands of families, that did not merit an emergency hearing by this committee. And now that thousands of children are still separated from their parents, with no clear plan from this administration for reuniting these families, where is the emergency hearing on that issue? We know that Russia, after successfully interfering with our 2016 elections, is actively working to disrupt the upcoming elections as well. We are told this by all of our intelligence agencies. The former National Security Advisor testified that our intelligence agencies, despite this, have received no instructions from the White House to protect the integrity of our election system. Have we scheduled an emergency hearing on that matter? For that matter, have we conducted any oversight at all on election security, on the family separation crisis, on the administration's failure to protect Dreamers, on the Justice Department's radical decision not to defend the Affordable Care Act in court, on the Supreme Court's recent decisions to undermine voting rights and workers' rights, on the President's ongoing conflicts of interest and clear violations of the Emoluments Clause of the Constitution, or on the myriad other pressing issues within our committee's jurisdiction? No. As with so many issues, this committee stays silent. But on Hillary Clinton's emails, sound the alarms. Despite an Inspector General's report that in more than 500 exhaustive pages demonstrates conclusively that the outcome of the Clinton investigation was not affected by any improper bias, political or otherwise, we are wasting precious committee time to chase Hillary Clinton yet again. The Republicans seem desperate to prove that there was some sort of pro-Clinton and anti-Trump conspiracy within the FBI, when in fact the overwhelming evidence shows exactly the opposite. Virtually every action criticized in the Inspector General's report, Director Comey's July announcement, his public comments on the Clinton investigation and refusal to confirm the existence of the Trump investigations, and his October decision to announce publicly the reopening of the Clinton email investigation ultimately harmed the candidacy of Secretary Clinton and inured to the benefit of Donald Trump, and no one will deny that fact. But I guess we shouldn't let facts stand in the way of a good manufactured emergency. According to the Republican memo for today's hearing, today is also an opportunity for members to consider, quote, the Justice Department's compliance with the committee's March 22nd subpoena, close quote. A subpoena that was not issued in compliance with House rules and therefore cannot be enforced. Even if it were a properly issued subpoena, The fight over document production seems to have boiled down to certain documents that the Republicans know the Department of Justice cannot turn over. Much of it evidence relating to an ongoing criminal investigation, the scoping documents outlining specific lines of inquiry in an ongoing criminal investigation, and the identities of confidential human sources still working undercover in the field. And that, of course, is the whole point. As part of their coordinated and determined effort to undermine the special counsel's investigation, Republicans are requesting documents they know they cannot have. If they somehow find themselves in possession of sensitive documents that go to the core of the special counsel's investigation, and if past practice holds, those documents will end up in the possession of the subject of the investigation, namely President Trump, and shortly thereafter on Fox News. And if the majority is rightly denied, they will do their best to undermine the credibility of the Department of Justice, the credibility of the Deputy Attorney General, and by extension, the credibility of the special counsel. They will likely try to hold Mr. Rosenstein in contempt. Some have even threatened him with impeachment. They may argue that he must be removed from his oversight role over the special counsel's investigation. This is an investigation, I might remind my colleagues, that has already yielded 5 guilty pleas and that has led to the indictment of 20 people so far. The president and some of his closest advisors are under investigation for having participated in a criminal conspiracy with a foreign power against the United States. That is an emergency. The president practically confessed to Lester Holt on television that he obstructed the investigation into that conspiracy when he said that he fired former FBI Director Comey because of, quote, this Russia stuff with Trump and Russia, close quote. That is an emergency. But is that the subject of today's emergency hearing? No. Or of any emergency hearing? No, it is not. I know that this has been a hard week for the majority. I know that it must be tempting to change the subject and rally the base with cries of lock her up. But we do not have the luxury of hiding or voting present at this critical juncture for our democracy. We cannot hide from our responsibilities. We cannot hide from our obligation to conduct oversight of a corrupt administration. We cannot hide from our constitutional duty to protect our elections from foreign interference or to stand up for the rules and for our domestic institutions and for the rule of law. And we cannot hide from our responsibility not to interfere with a proper investigation. I ask my colleagues to consider this question as we proceed. When the special counsel's work is complete, when the enormity of what he finds has been laid bare, how will the American people judge your actions today? I yield back the balance of my time.
The committee will stand in recess and return immediately after this vote series to hear the opening statements of the Deputy Attorney General and the Director.
So we were anticipating opening comments, and they will be put on hold for the moment. But you can see the political battle lines being drawn there. Jerry Nadler called the Hillary Clinton email matter a tired investigation. We've got our panel on the wing. We will get commentary from them. But since we're coming up on 10 o'clock in the morning and they're going to take a break, why don't we squeeze in a break as well? And we shall be back momentarily. So the hearing is going to be on for some time. It's going to go for hours. And if you think about Chairman Goodlatte's commentary from yesterday after the 11-hour question and answer interview with Peter Strzok, Chairman Goodlatte put out a statement. He said the FBI counsel ordered Mr. Strzok not to answer many legitimate questions he was asked. We intend to hold a public hearing soon. We'll see how much of they get into that today. But House lawmakers on this committee on the Republican side are expecting Strzok to be on the Hill. But based on some of the commentary we're getting already about that interview from yesterday, you might wonder whether or not there might be a Fifth Amendment invoked here in Washington. Get a break here. Back in a moment. Back inside that hearing room.
Why do experts believe silver could rise to $100 an ounce? Because according to a recent Forbes report, global demand for solar energy is going through the roof. China is leading the way with plans to build 100 of these massive solar farms. China's rising silver demand alone could equal